What is a super popular TV show or movie that you can't stand? Thump the Hippo Slayer said, I can't stand the whole backstory part. It's pretty funny on American Ninja Warrior though when they spend 5 minutes going through their tragic backstory and how they're running this track for their nan and then they slip and fall on the first obstacle. Ztarian said, I have fond memories of watching Ninja Warrior on G4 TV. Even without the long-ass backstories there were still people you rooted for. Whether it was some costume choice like dressing up like a mummy, or if they were a fan favorite who kept coming back like the firefighter guy, I still had some connection and fondness for those running the course. Giving 3 minutes for their life stories is BS that just annoys me and drags the show on. Edit, he was a fisherman, my bad. Small detail but still. Mephistus Ghost said, any and every Herder We're in Alaska show on TV. They all seem incredibly staged. They're filled with people who are either playing a character or must live in rural Alaska because they would be social outcasts in civilization. Every one of those reality shows have some stupid manufactured drama that simultaneously makes the protagonist look like a genius and a fucking idiot. Situated Mass said, so the deadliest catch was so deadly BC of how the fisheries were managed. There was a total catch quota, so each boat would work as long as possible and disregard any danger to get as much of the total catch as they could. They changed the system to individual transferable quotas, ITQs, where fishermen are allowed a set amount to catch individually based on previous fishing history. This is slightly controversial since it picks winners but stopped the fishing seasons from shrinking from months to days or even hours, helped fish populations, reduced risk, no need to work 48 hours in terrible weather, increased revenues and improved the product for the consumer. Another side effect of ITQs is deadliest catch got boring so they had to mix in some bullshit drama to keep the ratings up. One Boiled Cabbage said, 90 Day Fiancé. I liked it at first, but now it's just filled with whiny, teen-esque drama that make me wonder why they don't just break it off immediately. I get money plays a factor, but for people like the family Chantel and Stacy and Darcy, I can't help but wonder why they'd put themselves out there and be constantly in the line of drama. Shrivatsasamani said, I like how they're in the middle of an insane drama, with a rival school and drugs and murderers. And then they just have a 5-minute dance-off between Veronica and Betty. Why? Just why? That and Jingle Jangle. Every time someone on Reddit replies with Riverdale I get immediately irritated. Jingle. Fucking. Jangle. That's got to be the least threatening drug name on earth. And they drop it with a straight face trying to act like it's a serious matter. It's like saying, oh my god that serial killer who only murders babies is on the loose. Oh, what's his name? General Pikachu. No. Swiss Miss 90 said, to me it's so bad it's good spoilers. I mean what's not to believe about high schoolers being presidents of middle-aged motorcycle gangs, or running their own bar, or busting their own father as a serial killer, or owning a gym for underprivileged kids after being subjected to a juvenile underground fighting to the death ring, or overtaking their mom's brothel, or their mom being undercover in a suicide cult ran by Chad Michael Murray? I mean, sorry but that is quality shit in my book. One Doug Thetog said, Australian here. The Block, Big Brother, Married at First Sight. I'll fuck it. All of it. It's all shit. I'm going to the pub. Edit, for all those telling me that I can't go to the pub, I can. I'm in regional Victoria, and they open? But I'm not going. The publican is a cunt. Thanks for the advice though, you fucking wombats. P.S. Thanks for the awards. I don't know what they mean, but I reckon I could have a beer with you cunts. Fouled Wimmerlake said, when I was applying for grad school programs I briefly got hooked on it. As part of the interview process you have to be on your game 100% of the time, beaming how smart you were in all your academic accomplishments at other very smart people. After every interview I was just so sick of being smart and wanted to empty out my brain with a piece of idiocy. The Bachelor was perfect for that. Back and said, I used to teach middle school and one day we had a mandatory assembly. Teachers and students were told it was an anti-bullying suicide awareness assembly. It ended up being the author of 13 Reasons Why. This was several years ago, when it was just a book and they were in the planning stages of the TV production, doing a promotional tour. It was absolutely the lamest assembly I've ever attended in my life. He kept name-dropping that the TV show might feature Selena Gomez. After the assembly I rented the book to see if it would work as a class novel, but in the first couple chapters it had a blowjob scene and it was downhill from there. So yeah, not something I'd have my class of 12-13-year-olds read together. A couple years later the Netflix series came out and I watched it out of curiosity and because my kids were watching and talking about it. It was worse than the book because it romanticized suicide even more by actually showing the dead girl as a phantom character. The author claims that he wrote it to help prevent teen suicide, but he made it worse by giving a false image of suicide and finality of death. Death Not a Shark said. The concept of weaponizing your suicide against the people that you feel wronged you struck me as very dangerous for young audiences. I'm glad I did not watch this show when I was a depressed teenager. The show glorifies her suicide as an act of personal heroism. For people who do not feel important enough to live, I think it is a bad idea to suggest that their death can give them that importance. In some ways the show is bold for taking on several issues that most shows aimed at teenagers wouldn't want to sully their brand with, but in other respects it uses these issues somewhat irresponsibly and often seemingly for the sake of shock value. A study set out to demonstrate that the teen suicide rate noticeably spiked in the month following the release of 13 Reasons Why, and the data is certainly compelling. Highest spike in the 5 years prior to the show's streaming. At least one girl that I read about watched the show and then killed herself shortly afterwards in the same way that Hannah does. I remember her mother saying she watched 2 episodes with the daughter and begged her not to finish the show due to her mental health problems. I believe Netflix removed the suicide scene from the show due to the pushback after release. Dark Paladin said. The concept of weaponizing your suicide against the people that you feel wronged you struck me as very dangerous for young audiences. Teenagers commonly have fantasies about getting back at those who wronged them. The idea that you could get revenge and escape whatever torment you're feeling at the same time is doubly empowering. I'd argue even that it doesn't take much of a jump to go from hurting others emotionally by killing yourself to bringing a gun to a class to physically hurt them before killing yourself. Slightly Default said. Honestly, some of the girl's reasons for suicide didn't even make sense and just made her come off as incredibly vain. The show's last season is a murder mystery for some reason. That same season also tries to make a rapist a likable character, so, as my friend puts it, llamas with hats did it better, and that wasn't even meant to be serious. Edit, added a word. Dindu YT said. Big Brother, I don't know why but people love that show in my country Nigeria, for just going there to enjoy luxury, win prizes and be boring and immature on television, and to make it worse that show was meant for people that were poor or looking for opportunities to showcase their talents, but instead it is filled with rich grown adults who just want to be verified on Instagram. Really annoys me every time. It all started with Big Brother Africa, which was interesting and fascinating to see people from different countries with different accents and cultures all in one house, and as you might guess that show did well, but Big Brother Africa stopped airing for whatever reason and my country decided to capitalize on it and call it Big Brother Nigeria, but hosted them South Africa for some reason, and the first one was pretty good but as it went on it became terrible. There is a season airing now in Nigeria and from what I can see on social media it looks boring and bland and filled with men that looks like they are in their late 30s and lied in their resume. Silent said. I took the shower and had left the TV on in the other room. After I got out, the show had come on and I could hear it playing as I was toweling off and getting dressed. Just hearing it, the dialogue was honestly non-stop. Canned laughter. Inexplicably pause. Repeat. It just went on and on like that. It might as well have had every other line be "that's what she said." Badger Sprite said. Glee was really confusing because at times the show seemed 100% self-aware that she was supposed to be an unlikable protagonist and a parody of theater kids like it, but then at other times she was presented with complete sincerity as a hero without any irony whatsoever. That also describes Glee as a whole, tbh, like it flip-flopped between being self-aware and ironic and being completely tone-deaf and self-important with zero irony or self-awareness very unartfully. Earthdweller11 said. Funny enough, the actress was just in the news like yesterday. Because she's apparently a rancid diva, that's even worse than the character Rachel Berry. Anyway, so little backstory first for those not in the know. On the show Glee, Rachel eventually moved to New York City and gets the lead in Funny Girl opening on Broadway. Funny Girl originally starred Barbra Streisand, and Babs was an idol not only of the character Rachel Berry but her real-life actress, Lea Michele. So after Glee, Ryan Murphy, the showrunner of Glee, he actually buys the rights to Funny Girl so that he can stage a Broadway production and let Miss Lea Michele star in it in real life just like Rachel Berry did on the show. It stalled and someone else got the rights from Murphy, but the show was still trying to get produced and Lee was always the top contender for landing the lead role when it eventually got made. Then a year or two ago all kinds of bad stories came out about her. There were always rumors, but now her co-stars were putting her bad antics out there and backing each other up. Still though, it seemed like she was destined for starring on Broadway in Funny Girl when it finally got made. Then yesterday it was announced Funny Girl was finally being made and Beanie Feldstein, and not Lea Michele, was cast as the lead. Enjoy the schadenfreude. Silent said. The shows were never good, but in the early seasons I was at least entertained by The Flash and Supergirl. They've devolved to the point of being unwatchable. I'm convinced that they're saving money by never ever revising a script. The Flash is basically a bunch of incredibly convoluted pseudoscience and nonsensical origins of threats that they defeat with an equally convoluted regurgitation of said pseudoscience that someone either instantly invents a machine to fix or bury motivational speech as away. Supergirl tries so hard to be woke and draw the most painfully transparent real-world parallels that they can. So hard, in fact, that they do so at the expense of all else, including writing anything close to a coherent, solid storyline. The new Superman and Lois is so far beyond either of those shows in terms of writing and production values. I'm enjoying it so far, but dreading the day they decide to phone it in like every other Arrowverse show inevitably ends up doing. Couch Potato San said. Anything on Bravo. My mom likes it, but it's just a bunch of rich wives that somehow always hates each other, and have to solve it like children. I get the point of reality shows are supposed to be around drama like this, but there's a line between drama and straight up outrageous and stupid. The only show I like on there is Married to Medicine, because it shows women who are actually smart and make their own money. Yes, there is drama, but I'm guessing since they didn't always rely on their husbands to pay their way out of it, they handle it like adults and move on. Stumbling Corgi said. Hey fellow company. I work in New York. I haven't worked days in a while, midnighter, but when I did the inmates would go nuts for DBZ. Every weekend the dorm would tune both TVS and to see what felt like 2 hours of Dragon Ball. I loved hanging out at my desk watching them get all hyped during the Cell tournament. I used to talk anime with most of them. I still see lots of manga floating around the dorm. I see them reading it before we turn the cell lights out at 1 a.m. Stay safe bud and have fun. Zigab said. When BBT first came out, I was super geeky, fresh out of high school and used to being bullied for my interests. I was excited at this TV show being advertised as being about geeks, for geeks and celebrating geek culture. Then I watched it. The same tired tropes and stereotypes I was bullied for through school were the entire show. Sure, the main cast were geeks, the show was about them, but the comedy was explicitly at their expense. Look at the losers who can't talk to women, look at the creeps and their lame interests and hobbies, look at the asshole know-it-all I am Verismer poster. Look at them and laugh. Argylskin said. Big Bang Theory. I'm a geek. I have an autistic adult son but I can't relate to any character or like anything I've ever heard on that show. Autism being a punchline bugged my son when he saw an episode. He said people laughing at it doesn't make them understand it and treat people better who have it. Bungla Jerry said. The thing that's even worse about this show is that Sheldon is not canonically autistic, it's just Sheldon being Sheldon, whatever the fuck that means. It's really no different than having an ethnic character whose exact ethnicity you refuse to pin down so that you can engage in whatever tropes you want without actually having to answer for it, or research it for accuracy. Given that the audience reads him as autistic anyway, the show could have just had the fucking courage to hire a script advisor and go with it, getting some legit representation out there. But no, they couldn't even go that far. Panicking Fallout Pilot said. Twilight. Storytime. I was born just as the Twilight movies were coming out. My big sister read the books. And she didn't want to say anything to my parents, who decided to name me Bella, because apparently it took them a very long time to choose a name. So I grew up with people asking if I am a Twilight baby, which I am not, and meeting other Twilight babies, who were all dogs, because nobody had the guts who name their actual child after Bella from Twilight. Edit. I forgot to mention the worst part of this. I am very pale with black hair. I look like a vampire. Oh haha, you're Bella and you look like a vampire. Hehehe Elton Queen Ulu. SNK 209 said. 13 reasons why. As a former suicidal, that shit was just too unrealistic for me. That and the plot was shit because I lost immersion. Sis liked it enough to finish it though. Edit. Found out Sis only liked the first season, but finished seasons 1 and 2. She dropped the third and fourth. That's another strike against 13 reasons why. Also, to anyone thinking about suicide, think but don't do. Besides, I didn't kill myself out of the practicality. Revenge is a thing. So is proving the world wrong. That and try practicing Stoicism, Western philosophy, or Buddhism, Eastern philosophy, or both. Krusty Batch Offnature said, but it certainly has a lot of flaws that make watching it a slog sometimes. Around the time the saviors showed up and they fully settled into the soap opera cliffhanger formula, it became unbearable. As a comic reader, that was the section I was looking forward to, and the casting of JDM worked great for me. Then it fully turned into the primetime version of As the Zombie Turns or The Young and the Zombified. I made it through that season and the start of the next and gave up. I keep up with it for a friend who I always used to talk to about episodes on Monday morning, so we can keep that up, but I don't watch anymore. Definitely not Trine said. I think the basic premise is interesting. If you were in the middle of the wilderness with nothing but your wits, could you survive? How would you do it? Of course the answer is no, because the average person is not trained to survive in the wilderness, and even if they were, it would still be incredibly difficult. But it would be cool to put a person in that scenario and see how far they get without it being too dangerous. The show could be interesting if it focused on how people solved some problems of the scenario, like how to obtain food, clothing, shelter, etc. And it would be cool to see future contestants, participants, in later episodes who have seen the previous episodes and they build upon and expanded the techniques of the previous participants. Nilnan said. The movies were horseshit, but the books honestly weren't bad. I feel like part of the reason it got so much hate was because it was very popular among teenage girls. There are some genuinely crappy franchises targeted towards and popular among teenage boys that didn't even come close to the level of hate and ridicule Twilight, Vampire Diaries and 50 Shades received. Guys joked about it and girls were like, no, I'm not like other girls. I also like insert popular movie show for men. It was essentially hated so much on cause it was easy due to the audience. The same way drinking Starbucks, caring about makeup, clothes, playing with Barbies have been seen as inferior compared to popular guy activities. Cupcake Valkyrie said. Family Guy suffered the same fate as a lot of long-running animated series. All of their characters ended up philanderized. Peter started off as a decent guy that was a bit slow but still gave a shit about his family. As the show progresses, he turns into a complete moron that can't even perform basic tasks by himself. Meg started off as an average-looking girl that wasn't very popular in school, but the writers decided she should be a horrifically deformed monster that causes people who see her topless to projectile vomit or commit suicide without changing how she's drawn at all. We're just supposed to accept that she's hideous, somehow. Stewie went from being a slightly effeminate homicidal maniac whose genius was thwarted by his infant-like tendencies into practically screaming from the rooftops about how gay he is and routinely trying to have sex with people as a fucking toddler. Lois started out as the straight, whoa, man to Peter's shenanigans. She was the anchor, the voice of reason, but she had some little quirks of her own. Over time, she transformed from a mostly normal person with some quirks to a mostly quirky person with occasional bouts of sanity. Brian went from an intelligent, level-headed individual to a die-hard straw liberal who's routinely hypocritical and pretty much just exists as the butt of jokes. Quagmire went from a reasonably respectful pervert and womanizer to a full-blown rapist who literally invites women home to date rape them. I could go on, but let's just say that pretty much every character in this show turned into a walking parody of themselves as time went on. Coleman Rosso said. Brian and Stewie were arguably the worst. Stewie's entire character was that he was this dastardly genius obsessed with murdering Lois, which set up several B-plots in earlier episodes. They removed his murderous tendencies, mostly, but kept his genius and it just doesn't work as well. To make things worse, the show still sporadically references his desire to kill Lois, then never commits to it unless it's convenient before dropping it again. Brian actually used to be something of a voice of reason for Peter, perhaps more so than Lois, as earlier episodes involved him doing something Lois wouldn't approve of, and he needed to confide in Brian. Nowadays he's just as vapid and selfish as Peter is, but with bits of Quagmire sex obsession sprinkled in along with his entire personality. Aside of that is him being a massive pretentious neoliberal and nothing more. Joe went from this tough no-nonsense cop to a shell of a man who gets ridiculed for being crippled non-stop and cries at the drop of a hat. I haven't seen the show since Cleveland was written back in after TCS's cancellation, so I'm not sure what happened to him. SSL Odd One said Riverdale fucking sucks. Like I could accept it if it was just a teen show, but they insist on jamming Archie comics in there. Archie was once a wholesome, vaguely if not directly Christian comic about some goofy kids doing goofy wholesome fun. Archie gets an idea, Jughead eats a sandwich, hijinks ensue. Kinda boring, but it is what it is. Riverdale opens with Archie nailing a teacher. Jughead leads a gang that sells drugs, but he's mad they sell drugs. Betty joins the gang. Cheryl and Tony, minor characters in the comics but bigger in the show, join the gang but leave and start their own. Veronica isn't in the gang, but she's semi-involved with organized crime. Archie manages to help the gang, Veronica, and start a vigilante group all around the same time. All 6 main characters are somehow involved in serious crime. I'm so glad to see these relatable teen characters in relatable teen situations. And we haven't even mentioned the musicals, the god-awful D&D knockoff they spend a season milking, or whatever pathetic excuse for a crown Jughead has now. The actors and actresses seem okay, and in interviews they even joke about how fucking weird the show is, so I don't want to rag on them too much, but this show seems like a 6th grade essay on what I did on summer vacation, but the author is currently running an intense fever and is hallucinating. If you don't think about them being Archie characters, it's just generic teen garbage, but the fact that it's now what people think of when they see Archie really fucking angers me. GQ Man of the Year said, Friends, but I think I know why. My women cousins and my guy cousin were into it. My guy cousin is only a year older than me, so it's not like it's a generational gap. They watched it regularly when it originally aired on NBC. They didn't want to miss an episode. I didn't watch it when it originally aired. I caught all of the episodes on syndication like 15 years ago. I think if you watch a show when it originally airs, it's more memorable to you because things are going on in your life and you're both nostalgic and excited about that time. For me, The Office is like that. I remember never missing an episode of The Office. I remember singing along with the intro. I remember laughing at their jokes and then a period where it wasn't that funny, but I watched it when it originally aired and I look back at that nostalgic time. I think that's how people who watched Friends episodes when they originally aired on NBC feel. Powerbrowse said, I like the movie a lot, but I agree with you that it was extremely stressful. I felt like I was fighting anxiety for 2 hours, but I like the fact the movie made me feel that way. Just curious, but what about the plot did you find confusing? I felt like it was pretty straightforward, but maybe I'm missing something. Emo, the plot is basically following the terrible decisions of Sandler's character and following his constant shell game, moving debts around to appease the bad people he's in deep with. There's probably more to it than that, but that's my quick and dirty summary. Pop Pine said, I actually thought the anxiety and stress enhanced the experience for me in a good way. Made it feel like I was in Adam Sandler's position where he was literally in such a bad spot in life and he is barely crawling out of it. I experience enough anxiety and stress early as it is, so I was somewhat used to the induced anxiety. In terms of the confusing plot in the first watch, yes, it can seem somewhat confusing as we probably didn't think we'd need to pay attention as much as we should, but on my second watch, it was actually better second time because I would be like, oh right, that's why, because I would actually understand it now. With a little more concentration and understanding, it's not as confusing as some may think.